Around the time I decided to start microdosing, a friend came to visit me in February of 2017. I hadn't had LSD for quite a long time at this point, and yet we still took 300 micrograms each. Now that's quite a high dose if you're not aware for somebody who perhaps hasn't had it for quite a while, and even someone who has, it's still, pushing the boundaries for a lot of people. In all honesty, looking back at that now, it probably wasn't the greatest idea to have done that at that point in time, and that's only for two reasons. First reason is because I hadn't had LSD in a long time, and I sort of forgotten about the cognitive shift that happens and the intensity and the anxiety and all the stuff that can come up with that as you start to go up into the peak. So I hadn't really prepared myself for what was about to unfold, which is one thing. But the second reason, really, what was the biggest problem, was around that time, for a few weeks prior, I'd been having some psychotic symptoms as a part of my schizoaffective disorder, and I'd been having voices for some weeks that were pretty much persistent and weren't going away. So these two voices at the time that had been around persistently was pretty unusual because I'd never heard these voices before. There was a male and a female, and the times I have had voices before, it's generally only been one voice. So there was a male and a female, and to be honest, as they usually are, they were total assholes, tag teaming between things that they say. But as I've had a lot of experience with this, and I think it's just the way my mind might be uniquely able to handle this generally, I'm usually pretty good at ignoring these sort of psychotic symptoms pretty well, whether it's auditory or visual hallucinations. And there's only been a couple of times where I've felt that it was getting the better of me. A few days before, my other friend who came over to have the 300 micrograms with me, another friend had come to visit me, and we were sitting in my lounge room having a discussion, just talking. And I told them then that about the voices, and they know I have an illness, and even when we were talking, they were just consistent. The voices just did not stop. And I just sort of blocked them out because they hadn't really gotten the better of me. They were more of a nuisance, and somehow I was holding it together reasonably well. I could certainly see though through those sort of things how some people don't handle it very well, and they lose it a bit. And that's why I suppose a lot of these medications are around, to try to just bombard the brain to stop all that. So on the Friday night that my friend had come over, within a very short time of him, we took 2 tabs each, and it was quite good quality LSD, I must admit, since I've had quite a lot since then, and that was definitely a very good batch. And as you can imagine, within a short time of having that, things became very intense very quickly, and I mean, I usually quite enjoy that, although even in a normal state of mind that can get a little heavy sometimes. But during this time, as it was coming up, and I think it was probably related to the two factors I mentioned before, a panic started to kick in, and it started to encompass me. At that point, I really felt like I was about to lose my mind, and I know that that's a common thing that people do feel at times with LSD anyway, but this felt different for me, and I think it may have been potentially related to the psychotic symptoms I was already having. And I really felt at that point I was really going to descend into some kind of madness. I do recall at the time thinking to myself as things were getting a bit full on, thinking perhaps this is where you see someone go mad and they end up getting naked and running down the street screaming, and I didn't think I was going to be doing that, but I could sort of see how some people might react in that kind of way. I think the reason for me was because I was dealing with these voices. The LSD is really an amplifier to things anyway, so I think the psychotic symptoms along with the voices, it really delved me into some sort of depth of hell that I really cannot put into words, but I'm sure some of you can probably experience that anyway, just from your own personal experiences with perhaps a bad trip with LSD. At this point of time, as I knew I was sort of starting to struggle somewhat, I asked my friend to keep talking to me, just to try and keep some conversation and try and distract myself from myself, I suppose. He ended up talking about this trades fair that was coming up within, I think, the next month or two, not far from where I lived. I remember asking him, why he wanted to go, and he was telling me, and but really, I really couldn't concentrate on any of those reasons. There was no real depth of conversation or dialogue. It was just more me trying to distract myself from myself, and I even tried to, throw in a few things too. But I really wasn't following what he was saying. I was too focused really on the panic that had set in. As time went on, this sense got deeper and deeper, and it felt like I was really being totally engulfed by it, I was starting to get a feeling of terror. And I was trying to deny that to myself, because I thought that by really acknowledging that and recognizing that things were going to get a lot more catastrophic in the way of feeling. At this point, this concept of time had become completely meaningless. Nothing really made any sense anymore. I'd lost complete control of all concepts. The numbers were just mere symbols, completely meaningless. And I remember looking at the clock, thinking how long it would take until perhaps this would pass, this feeling. But to be honest, the concept of time meant nothing. And when I looked at the numbers, I really couldn't tell the difference between an hour and a minute. It just had no meaning to me. So as I sat on the couch in my living room, still, with all this going on, the visuals were becoming pretty insane, which is generally something that's quite enjoyable at times. But as I said, I think I did just the wrong set and setting, I suppose. And if you're not familiar with that term, it's something worth looking up, because I did it all wrong that time around. And I felt quite lost in this world. I felt like I would never return from where I was currently at. I closed my eyes and I'll attempt to sort of really block out what was going on. But you can't really block out the cognitive shift that's going on in your own brain. Even if you close your eyes, it's just all going crazy out there. And I just remember lots of really intense fractals animated, and it was just really fast and intense. So during this point where I closed my eyes, I seemed to be coming to this sort of visual world, as if some sort of hallway or corridor, which was very surreal looking. And if you notice the drawings that I actually have in this video, that's a drawing I did of this particular experience. And there's an image that I had drawn in, I think it's the top right area there. You'll see a sort of corridor with some sort of checkerboard sort of look to it and some doorways. It was a bit like that, what I had seen. And I was going through this corridor, and it felt very much like a horror movie. It was a very, very sort of scary thing. And there were so many doors, and I was trying to go through some of them, and some of them were like locking down in front of me, like things just closing on me, and some of them were like barred doors, almost like you'd see in a jail. And I could feel this sense, almost like a presence or a darkness within, and I think it was probably related to these voices. And it was almost like they had a sense of their own, entity, like a totally different consciousness, as if it was trying to stop me from finding it, because that's what it seemed to be what I was doing, looking for this particular thing. I felt like I was trying to find something and get to this place, and it was quite a maze going through all this stuff, looking through my mind. And I remember eventually I did get to a spot, and this is where it gets quite interesting actually. So whilst walking around and looking through these corridors and things, things were really chasing down on me, or at least felt like something was. So I'd gone really deep into my mind, it really felt, and even looking in retrospect, it felt that way, very much so. So this presence almost, that was sort of almost like a monster or something that was going to chase me. I couldn't see anything visually, but I could feel it. The way I sort of described it later, it was almost like a master chess player moved very quickly, and I was playing a game of chess, and I had to keep moving my piece as quickly as possible to try and avoid this thing catching up to me. It wasn't something that I actually saw as chess pieces, it was just a way of sort of describing it like a game, but it was almost like the chess pieces were really trying to move from one room or one corridor to another, but it all happened very, very quickly. So I think the reason I was sort of doing that was it really felt that I needed to do that. I had to just keep moving from one thing to another. I couldn't keep stuck on one thought or one place or one vision. And it was, funnily enough, it was, if you've ever seen the movie The Labyrinth, it was sort of like a weird background like that, and everything was really quite surreal. So what I really am calling a game, well, I call chess, but calling it a game, I found the voices that had plagued me for weeks. Finally found them in this spot in this room. And this is where it got very interesting, was that when I found them, it was like this bolt or a shard of light. It wasn't like lightning though, it was like a shard that was almost shaped like lightning, but not with a little kick thing that you normally see in lightning. Not quite like that, it was more like a big shard, very long, and it seemed to visually come from outside of me and go through my mind and like a precision pinpoint just smash right into where these voices were. And it just happened so quickly that when I opened my eyes, they had completely gone, and I felt totally different. It was a very amazing experience. All these voices I had for weeks just had gone completely, and even weeks after they hadn't returned. So this is where I found it very, very interesting, because I thought, well, something happened there. I'm not really sure exactly what, but it's almost like I tracked down through my mind the spot and where these things were. And I don't ever remember consciously doing anything to cause a shard. It just, when I found it, that just seemed to be what happened. So I think at this moment that I'm talking about, this sort of bolt or this shard, this sharp pointy thing that hit them, I think this experience is of profound significance. And not just for me personally, but I think for further exploration into the study of mental illness and perhaps the role that psychedelics may have to play in treating it. So I was very curious about, could it really have been the LSD that allowed me to eradicate this element of my psychosis? And if so, how? Over time, through microdosing over the previous year, I've sort of gotten a little bit more of a handle on, I think, what's going on here. And I believe the answers to our problems really are in our own mind. And I'm not 100% sure how to go about that exactly. This channel is called Psychology, Philosophy and Psychedelics, and I think it's not just one approach. I think it's through using all these different sort of attempts that I've been trying very hard myself to find some sort of peace and sovereignty over these sort of conditions. So if this is really the case of what happened for me, what really is psychosis then? What are these various neuroses? I know that we could say what causes them, and I've got some theories on that in another one of my videos. But I'll put a link down the bottom in the comments section that you can look at sort of an analogy that I had about how I've looked at the brain. So at this point, I've sort of painted my own picture about what I think needs to happen, and I think it's almost like a personal self-psychoanalysis to really confront, I suppose, the darkness. I think that's what Carl Jung called it. But I think it's that, but even deeper than that, in a sense. And that's why I don't really recommend this method at this point of time for every person to go down, especially if you suffer from some sort of psychotic illness or any kind of neuroses, really, because I know how dangerous it can be to have to confront that and confront yourself. And most people are pretty good at avoiding those things anyway. We see that through alcoholism, various drug use. And I'm not talking about the sort of thing like I'm using. Not really using it as a way to try and escape. It's more or less trying to get to the depths and find a treatment for myself. So I know how hard it can be and how painful it can be, and some people have some shocking traumas in their life, and that's the thing with psychedelics. They're very unpredictable, and it's a very slippery slope sometimes, but I want to really make these videos because I think they're of some interest point for anyone doing any kind of research into it, or on any kind of professional level, or even on their own sort of personal level of looking into this. So anyway, I hope you found this story of some interest, and I'm obviously going to be doing a great deal more videos on my other experiences and thoughts and views on what I've seemed to discover through my efforts to try and tame, I suppose, as Carl Jung calls it, the shadow within.